The woman is a completely useless fool. Just wait and see. Next month we'll get rid of her, and she won't even realize it. I held my breath. The voice in the video was unmistakable. It was Scott Reynolds, my boss for the past 15 years. The phone screen glowed brightly in the darkness of my bedroom. The accompanying message was short and to the point. I think you should see this before you go to work on Monday. The sender was Ryan, a junior employee I had mentored when he first joined the company. I pressed play again. Just 30 seconds long, but enough to make my chest tighten. Scott stood in the middle of the crowd, a glass of wine in hand, his smirk dripping with arrogance. It was the annual party for Vanguard Consulting, the company I had devoted over a decade and a half to. They were laughing. The colleagues I once considered allies, the very people I had helped countless times, were now standing there, chuckling along with Scott's mockery of me. Everly really thinks she's the best, huh? Well, I'll replace her. Just wait and see. Next month, we'll have a fresh face sitting in her chair. Each word sliced through my pride like a knife. What did I do wrong? For 15 years I had worked tirelessly. Late nights, missed family gatherings, weekends buried under projects. Everything just to ensure Scott didn't have to take responsibility for his own mistakes. I had rewritten his speeches, handled PR crises for him, and even covered up financial blunders that could have jeopardized the company. And this was how he saw me? I tightened my grip on my phone. I didn't feel rage right away. I didn't scream or cry. Instead, something cold settled deep inside me. A sense of resolve. If Scott thought I would just sit back and wait for the day they pushed me out, he was about to make the worst mistake of his life. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I had 1 month, 4 weeks to prepare. I couldn't let my emotions show. I couldn't let him know that I was already aware of his plan to get rid of me, to push me out of the position I had worked so hard for. I would play along, keep him unsuspecting until the very last moment. I would not walk away empty-handed, and when I stepped out of that office for the last time, Scott Reynolds would realize that he was the real fool. I showed up at work on Monday morning, right on time, as if nothing had happened. Scott stood in the conference room, coffee in hand, laughing with Jordan, the head of finance, and Megan, the HR director. He glanced at me briefly as I walked in, then went back to his conversation, completely confident that I was still oblivious to his plan. Good. Let him think that. I sat at my desk, turned on my computer, and took a deep breath. 4 weeks. I had 4 weeks to execute the perfect counterattack. Week 1. Gather evidence to make sure they couldn't fire me so easily. I started by combing through all my work emails. 15 years of dedication meant I had thousands of archived messages, and I knew exactly what I was looking for. Scott wasn't just ungrateful, he was careless. I found countless emails he had sent but never bothered to delete. Emails detailing shady financial dealings. Instances where he asked me to tweak numbers in reports to appease clients, and contracts that had never been properly submitted to the board. I downloaded everything and stored it on a personal hard drive. Every step I took was legal, I was simply keeping records of my own work. But I knew these would be powerful weapons when the time came. Week 2. Strengthen my relationships with key clients and pull them to my side. Clients were Scott's biggest weakness. If I left quietly, he might have a chance to keep them. But if they lost faith in Vanguard Consulting before I walked away, there would be nothing he could do to stop the fallout. I reached out to Jonathan Hayes, the CEO of Hayes & Co., one of the largest clients I had worked with for over a decade. I invited him to lunch. Midway through the meal, I subtly steered the conversation in the direction I wanted. Jonathan, I've been thinking a lot about my future lately. If a better opportunity came along, I'm not sure I'd be able to keep working with you long term. Jonathan set his glass down, his gaze sharpening. Everly, are you considering a move? I smiled. I'm just considering my options, but I want to make sure that if any changes happen, you won't be affected. Jonathan was silent for a moment before nodding. Let me be straight with you, Everly. I trust you more than Scott. If you leave, I still want to work with you, no matter where you go. I trust you. I gave a small smile and raised my glass. That was exactly the response I had hoped for. Week 3. Preparing the legal groundwork with my evidence. I needed help. I reached out to Emily Carter, a lawyer specializing in employment contracts and corporate disputes. I explained my situation. Being pushed out early without just cause, after more than a decade of service. Emily reviewed the documents I had gathered and smiled. Everly, I think you have a very strong case if you choose to pursue legal action. But you'd have to be firm and see it through to the end. I shook my head. I don't want to sue. I just want to leave on the best possible terms. And start fresh. Emily nodded. Then I'll make sure you're not bound by any legal clauses that could hinder your next move. With Emily's guidance, I ensured that when the time came, Scott wouldn't be able to interfere with anything related to me or my future plans. Week 4. Laying the foundation for my next step. A carefully crafted plan. The turning point. I sent a brief email to Ethan Monroe, CEO of Summit Strategies, Vanguard Consulting's biggest competitor. Ethan, I hope you're still interested in the conversation we had last year. I'm about to have a new opportunity to truly make a difference, and I think you'll want to hear about it. Let me know when you have time. An hour later, I received a response. Everly, I've been waiting for this email from you. Let's meet Friday evening. My plan was in motion. As the final week passed, I maintained my usual composure, acting as if I had no worries about my job. But beneath the surface, every piece was falling into place. Scott Reynolds thought he had everything under control. There was just one thing he didn't know. I was already ahead of him. At 9:45 a.m. on Monday, I received an email from Scott. Everly, please, come to my office at 10:30 a.m. to discuss some structural changes in the company. I smirked. Scott was making his move. I shut off my screen and took a deep breath. Over 15 years of relentless dedication, and now I was about to be thrown out like I had never existed. But I wasn't a pawn to be discarded so easily. If I was leaving, I would take everything that was mine with me. Scott thought today was the day I lost. But in reality, today was the day he would lose everything. I walked into Scott's office at 10:30 a.m. sharp, just as requested. Denise, the head of HR, was already seated, a file open in front of her, a pen neatly placed beside it. A standard HR process. Scott leaned back in his chair, trying to feign kindness. Everly, I know this isn't an easy conversation, but I trust you understand the company's situation. I kept my polite smile. Oh? The company's situation? What do you mean? Scott hesitated slightly but quickly regained his professional demeanor. We're restructuring, and unfortunately your position is on the list of cuts. Denise silently slid the file toward me. This is your severance agreement. We're offering a generous package and expect you to sign an NDA to protect internal information. An NDA? Of course. They wanted me to leave quietly. No complaints, no resistance, no talking to clients or competitors. I picked up the pen, pretending to skim through the documents, but in reality, I had already known every clause before I even walked into this room. I set the pen down and looked up at Scott. Of course, I completely understand. Scott raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected me to accept so quickly. Good, I knew you'd understand the situation the company is facing. I smiled. Of course. I've always understood the situation, haven't I, Scott? For a brief moment, something like worry flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly. I signed the document, playing the role of the loyal employee until the very end. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of my plan. I spent the entire afternoon cleaning out my workspace, packing up my things, smiling at colleagues, maintaining a perfectly calm demeanor. Scott and Denise watched me from a distance, as if they were keeping an eye on a bomb that could explode at any moment. But I didn't lash out. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my composure. I sat at my desk one last time, opened my computer, and drafted a single email. To Jonathan Hayes. Subject: regarding future collaboration. Jonathan, I wanted to express my sincere gratitude for our collaboration over the years. I wanted you to know that I will be leaving Vanguard Consulting at the end of today. I would still love to continue supporting you in your upcoming projects. If you're interested, I'd be happy to discuss potential new opportunities together. Best regards. Everly. I hit send and shut down my computer. Just one email, but it was the first domino in the price Scott Reynolds would have to pay. I walked out of the building for the last time at 5:02 p.m. No looking back, no regrets. The sky was a deep cloudless blue, the crisp air wrapped around me, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt free. For the first time I had made the right decision. For myself. Scott thought today was the end of my story. But in reality, today was the beginning of his nightmare. Because he had fired me after all those years of relentless dedication to his company. The next morning, I woke up with an unfamiliar but welcome feeling: relief. No more meaningless meetings, no more urgent midnight emails, no more late nights fixing Scott's mistakes. I pulled my coffee mug closer and picked up my phone. 12 missed calls. I raised an eyebrow. The name on the screen: Jordan, head of finance at Vanguard Consulting. Right below it was a string of frantic messages from Ryan. The same Ryan who had sent me the video. Everly, what did you do? The whole company is in chaos. Jonathan Hayes just pulled out all his contracts. Scott is losing his mind. Everyone is panicking. This is a nightmare. I smirked, taking a slow sip of coffee. Faster than I expected. Jonathan Hayes hadn't just walked away. He had taken an entire chain of clients with him. When a major client like Hayes & Co. jumps ship, it's like a lifeboat leaving a sinking vessel. Other clients see the warning signs, they know Vanguard Consulting is in trouble, and when trust disappears, so does the money. I opened my laptop and checked a financial news site. Vanguard Consulting faces mass client exodus. Stocks plunge 12% in early trading. I couldn't help but smile. 12%. And it was only the first day. At 10:30 a.m. my phone buzzed. The name on the screen: Scott Reynolds. I set my coffee down, letting it ring for a moment before picking up. Hello, Scott. The usual confidence in his voice was gone. Instead, his tone was tense, urgent, like a man who had just run a marathon. Everly, you did this, didn't you? I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm. About what, exactly? A beat of silence. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. You did something to cause all of this. I'm really not sure what you're talking about, Scott. He exhaled sharply, trying to control his anger. What did you do to make Jonathan Hayes leave? And then Whitmore Group, Larkins Technologies, and Greenway Logistics followed. Do you have any idea how much money we've lost this morning? I let out a soft chuckle. I'm guessing, a lot? A lot? We're losing millions of dollars, Everly. What did you say to them? I shrugged, knowing he couldn't see me. I didn't say anything, Scott. I simply informed them that I was leaving. Looks like they made their own decisions. I heard the sharp sound of Scott slamming his hand on his desk. Don't play games with me. I know you orchestrated this. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring every second. Orchestrated? Weren't you the one who said I was useless? An employee so replaceable, yet somehow not even worth a dime? Silence. I could almost hear the faint regret in his breathing. But no. Scott didn't regret what he had done to me. He only regretted letting me go. Everly, listen. No, Scott, you listen. I leaned forward, my voice colder and sharper than ever. You thought I was disposable. You thought I didn't matter. You planned to fire me right in front of everyone, treating me like a joke, and now? Now, you're calling me, begging me to fix this for you. He said nothing for a few seconds. I could feel his desperation tightening around him. I'll pay you more than anyone, just come back and help me fix this. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Scott, you can't buy back my loyalty, you threw it away. You don't understand. You're destroying your own career, this industry is small, you won't. I cut him off. No, Scott, you don't understand, I don't need you anymore, and you know what the best part is? This time, I let the silence stretch, making sure he absorbed every word I was about to say. No one needs you anymore. I hung up. Placing my phone down on the table, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Scott thought this was something that could be fixed. But this wasn't just a small mistake. This was the beginning of his downfall. 3 days after I left Vanguard Consulting, the real storm hit. The company's stock plunged 18% in a single morning. CNBC, Forbes, and Business Insider all ran the headlines. Vanguard Consulting loses key clients, uncertain future ahead. Scott Reynolds faces the biggest crisis of his career. Sterling and Company secures major contracts from Vanguard. I stared at the headline on my computer screen, taking a slow sip of coffee. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had planned. At 2:45 p.m., my phone rang. Ryan. Everly, you won't believe this. Scott just got pulled into an emergency meeting with the board. Everyone is saying they're discussing his termination, holding him responsible for losing the company's biggest clients. He's taking the fall for everything. I smirked. Even better than I expected, that was bound to happen. It's not just that. Sterling and Company is exploiting every gap to steal our clients. This morning they announced a new contract with Whitmore Group. I leaned back in my chair, a wave of satisfaction washing over me. My strike had landed perfectly. Ryan lowered his voice, almost whispering, as if afraid someone might overhear. Everyone here is losing it, no one knows what's coming next. I do, I smirked. Scott Reynolds is about to lose everything. At 4:30 p.m., the board summoned Scott into the conference room. A vast room with glass walls, filled with men and women in tailored suits sitting around a long table. Their faces were cold, devoid of sympathy. Scott sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain his composure. But the sweat on his forehead told the real story. We'll get straight to the point. A voice spoke from the far end of the table. Richard Sterling, chairman of the board. Vanguard Consulting is on the brink of collapse. We have lost over 35% of our strategic clients in less than a week. Scott swallowed hard. We can still. No. We can't. Richard interrupted. We've reviewed all financial reports. The estimated losses amount to tens of millions of dollars. Our legal team has examined the contracts we lost, and the results are dismal. He placed a thick folder on the table and slid it toward Scott. The clients she managed. They're all gone. Scott flipped through the pages, each number cutting into his reputation like a blade. Richard crossed his arms. We've tried to remain patient, but this situation cannot continue. Investors have lost confidence, they are demanding change and an immediate course of action. Scott clenched his fists, his voice dropping to a near plea. What do you mean? Another board member spoke. It's quite clear, you need to step down. We will appoint someone else to take your place. Silence blanketed the room. Scott's face went pale, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. No, I helped build this company, Richard Sterling remained unmoved. And now? You're the one destroying it. Scott looked around, searching for support among the board members, but no one met his gaze. If you do not resign voluntarily, the board will proceed with a vote for your removal, and I guarantee, you won't like the outcome. Scott took a shaky breath, realizing he had no choice. Finally he lowered his head, exhaling bitterly. I will resign. And with those 4 words, Scott Reynolds' career officially ended. The next morning, headlines exploded across the news. Scott Reynolds resigns amid Vanguard Consulting crisis. Vanguard's CEO steps down after major client exodus. I read each article, a quiet satisfaction settling in my chest. Scott Reynolds once believed he was untouchable. But today, he was nothing more than a discarded failure. I sat in my new office at Summit Strategies, my fingers gliding across the polished walnut desk. Morning sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows, casting a golden glow over the deep blue carpet, a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The email notification chimed. I opened my laptop, eyes scanning the subject line. From Scott Reynolds. Subject: I need to talk to you. I clicked it open. Everly. I know you have no reason to help me, but I'm asking for a chance to explain. I can't deny what happened, but I believe some things can still be fixed. Please meet me, just once. Help me figure out a way through this. I leaned back, letting out a soft laugh. Find a way through this? Scott still didn't get it. I typed my response, slowly, deliberately. Scott. There is nothing to fix, you destroyed everything yourself. I have no interest in any conversation with you. Good luck. I hit send and shut my laptop. That was the end of it. 2 days later, I was in a meeting with Nathan Pierce, CEO of Summit Strategies, when my assistant stepped in, looking uneasy. Everly. There's someone waiting in the lobby, he says he needs to see you urgently. I frowned. Who is it? She hesitated for a second before speaking softly. Scott Reynolds. The room fell silent. Nathan raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and walked out. I didn't rush. I wanted Scott to feel every second of the wait. When I stepped into the reception area, he was already there. Gone was the expensive suit and arrogant posture. Scott looked worn down, his hair unkempt, deep shadows under his eyes from lack of sleep. His entire presence reeked of failure. Everly, he said, his voice hoarse. I crossed my arms. I thought I made myself clear in my email. Scott clenched his fists, taking a deep breath. I need a job. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, and you think I can help with that? He nodded, desperation flooding his eyes. You're the only one who can. No one will hire me. Every major firm has shut their doors in my face. I have nothing left. I studied him for a moment before stepping closer. Scott, I said gently. For a brief moment, his face lit up, as if I was about to offer him a lifeline. Then I leaned in, locking eyes with him, my voice turning cold. You don't need a job. Scott froze. You need a lesson. His entire body stiffened. You can't do this to me. I let out a quiet laugh. Ooh, but you did this to me first, remember? You stood at a party, laughed at me, called me useless, said I was replaceable. And now, tell me, who's the one being replaced? Scott said nothing, because he knew I was right. I took a step back, crossing my arms. This will be the last thing I ever say to you. You are nothing to me now. You are just a part of the past I've left behind. His eyes darkened. I saw the last flicker of desperation in him. But I no longer cared. I gave a small nod toward the door. Now, leave, I have a meeting to get back to. Scott stood there for a second longer. Then slowly, he lowered his head, turned around, and walked out. The door shut behind him, taking with it the last remnants of the power and reputation he once had. And me? I turned back and returned to my work. I had won. I walked into my new office at Summit Strategies, no longer an employee under someone else's rule, but a senior partner. The polished nameplate on the glass door gleamed under the light. Everly Harper, senior partner. A year ago I had been dismissed, mocked behind my back, cast out like expired goods. Today, I bowed to no one. Nathan Pierce, CEO of Summit Strategies, greeted me with a firm handshake. Welcome to the family, Everly. I nodded, the feeling of victory filling every breath. From this day forward, I was no longer the one left behind. I was the one leading the way. 1 week later. Late at night, I sat alone in my spacious apartment, overlooking the city skyline. The golden glow of streetlights reflected off the deep red wine in my glass. I unlocked my phone, scrolling through the latest news on Vanguard Consulting. Former CEO Scott Reynolds loses all credibility. Blacklisted from major firms. The price of firing his best employee. Summit Strategies continues expansion, securing 2 major contracts formerly held by Vanguard. Everly Harper, Summit Strategies' newest senior partner, is reshaping the consulting industry, now appointed as the firm's vice president. I smirked, scrolling past hundreds of comments on financial forums, where people were still buzzing about Scott's downfall. Some said he got what he deserved. Some called it karma. But most agreed on one thing: he had dug his own grave. And I simply let him fall on his own. I set my phone down, took a sip of wine, letting the bold flavor linger on my tongue. Outside, the city remained loud, moving forward as it always did. But I was different. I was no longer trapped in the endless cycle of blind dedication, of meaningless sacrifice. For the first time, after years of devotion, oppression, and being cast aside without acknowledgement, I was truly free, and finally recognized for my worth. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, whispering to myself, I did it, and I did it with pride. Everly's story is more than just the perfect act of revenge. It is a powerful lesson in self-worth. In the workplace, or in any aspect of life, loyalty should never be given to those who fail to appreciate you. Everly was betrayed, but instead of breaking down, she chose to rise, to fight smart, and to reclaim control over her life. This is proof that patience, the right strategy, and self-respect can turn failure into opportunity, turn those who underestimated you into those begging for a second chance. What do you think about Everly's story? If you were in her position, how would you handle betrayal and injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more compelling stories about life and family.